Hmm? Ah!
I'm thrilled to have found something at this point in my life that's completely unexpected, that is bringing a lot of people a lot of joy. It really makes me happy. I feel so lucky and so grateful.
Podcast Junkies, episode 133, lucky number 33. I'm your host, Harry Duran. This is also known as the podcaster's voice because it's the show where we search out interesting voices in podcasting. All we want them to do is kick back their heels, relax a bit, and just talk about their shows, their dogs, their cats, their guests, or whatever else is on their mind. As you might imagine, it's pretty free-flowing and always conversational, always engaging, and always a good time. And I'm really appreciative of all the feedback we've been getting lately on social media, on Facebook. It's a bit of a challenge to keep up with all the feedback in the different places, but I think as a podcaster, it's important to have a system in place where you're periodically measuring and reviewing how people are getting back to you. So if you have a contact form, make sure you're checking those emails. If you are active on Twitter, make sure you're checking the comments. If you are on Facebook, make sure you're checking those notifications. Don't turn those off because every once in a while you'll get a nice gem of a comment in those platforms. So if you have the presence of mind to be on those platforms, take the additional step to block some time in your calendar once a week and make sure you're looking out for those comments, because if people are taking the time to write those comments, at the very least we can give them a shout out and let them know that it's much appreciated. In case you missed last week's episode, Neil Gilarte, director of the Messengers podcast and also the host of All Things Post, was here, and we just went old school. We had a really good time and reminiscing about the good old days. I know that's something that you tend to do as you get older, but it's fun when you find someone who can share those same stories and remembers the same timelines as you. It's always a good time. So we talked about a lot of cool ideas, and as podcasters, we always have new ones that we're brewing up. But it was just a fascinating discussion about the origins of the documentary, the origins of his show, some of the challenges he's faced as he was growing his podcast and his business. And it was really a heartfelt conversation, and I'm really appreciative for Neil coming on the show. This week, we speak to Ilana Levine. We talk about how she started her podcast and why, and the person behind the idea. We mention her interview with Octavia Spencer, Academy Award winner. And we talk about how she feels about people wanting to talk to her about podcasting instead of acting. She recently had Cascade on, who's an electronic music DJ. And this is after, and so you won't hear this mentioned, but I saw it recently in her Twitter post. And it's because her kids introduced her to the artist. And I thought that's just her personality and her way of really finding out what's interesting, what she resonates with, and those are the people that she has on the show. I give her a little grief about her Blue Apron sponsorship, and we talk about the story of when she knew she wanted to become an actress. All in all, lots of good stuff here. It seems like the time flew by, but she's a very, very entertaining guest, and now I consider her a really good friend. She recently had Alan Alda on, who was a student at my high school, obviously not at the same time, but that was a shout out to Archbishop Stepanek High School, all boys Catholic high school in White Plains, New York. This episode is brought to you by Podbean. Podbean's got some interesting stuff going on recently. I got caught up on their recent episode of Season 3, Episode 4 with my boy Vernon and my girl Jennifer. They had an episode just to talk about some of the new features, and I'll put a link to that in the show notes. But at a high level, they've just released the API for developers, so this is great if you're doing custom development. They've just introduced the App Marketplace. This is where you can find a growing list of services to enhance your podcasting experience. You can connect services like Dropbox and Google Analytics with your account. It's really interesting. I'm going to have to dig into this a little bit more because I love when you can customize apps to the way your workflow is. And it'll be interesting to see how much of those apps relate to my current workflow. And then they've got a feature that's a paid feature. It's called User Engagement Intel. And for those that have been keeping up with the news recently, Apple also introduced analytics that will let you track the performance of a specific episode. So this is an add-on for Podbean users. It's $9.99 a month, and it'll give you insights into the user's behavior on the Podbean app and the players. So you can see what portions users play over and over, what they skip, when they stop listening, and more. And as always, listeners, don't forget that in-depth intel is always a good thing when you're trying to attract and manage sponsorships and get listener support. So that's important stuff to have. And then the last thing I thought was fun is that they've now added Podbean on Amazon Alexa. To sign up, head on over to podbean.com/podcastjunkies. That's our specific URL. So please, if you go there, use that URL. And as a bonus to listeners this week, if you actually set up your Podbean account, let me know. And the first 2 people to do that, I'll give you half an hour of free coaching, and I'll just want to make sure you're getting set up with everything in the right way. So we can use that half hour to talk about anything. It doesn't have to be hosting, but that's my give back to you guys. If you do set up with Podbean using the podbean.com/podcastjunkies link, let me know, and I'd be happy to get you along your way. So also stay tuned to the end of the episode where I reveal this week's retention hashtag. I love when regular users play along. Now to my interview with Ilana. Full show notes available at podcastjunkies.com/133. So, little known fact about my next guest, she didn't spend too much time thinking about the show's name, as she was told it would come to her organically. Ilana was born in New Jersey. She's an actress and a director, has appeared in such films as Failure to Launch, Confessions of a Shopaholic, and Friends with Kids. She's been married to Dominic Famusa since October of 2002, and they have 2 children. She's played the role of Lucy Van Pelt in the 1999 revival of the Broadway play You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown, and has also appeared in Wrong Mountain, The Last Night of Ballyhoo, and Neil Simon's Jake's Women, just to name a few. Welcome to Podcast Junkies, Ilana.
Thank you so much. I am so excited to be here.
How'd I do?
I got nervous when you said she's been married since October. I was like, it feels like a lot longer than October. Feels like almost 15 years. And then you added the year, and all was right with the world.
So if, regular listeners will know that that's not a normal introduction for me, but I'm so inspired by what you do and the response that your guests get when you do that I had to do a little bit more homework and make sure that you got the same treatment on my show.
It's always nice to hear one's Broadway credits or film credits said out loud, because sometimes you start to feel like, have I done anything? And then Harry says this, and this, and I have done something. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I think it's always, what they say is that, I think it's actually a Steve Jobs quote that says, when you look back at the past year or 2 years, it's hard to measure progress. But when you look back at a longer period of time, maybe 10 years, then you can sort of put everything into context and say, oh, okay, sometimes it looks like I was on a bit of a dip there, but then it's just everything is in cycles. So I think I heard someone say recently that when you're I think it was on your show, one of the actors says when you're at the top.
Tony Shalhoub talks about
right,
life as a roller coaster, and that there's this cyclical fluidity to a process, which is when you're on top, as amazing and exciting as it is to be on the very top of the roller coaster, it is inevitable that it will go back down, and that when you're on the bottom, that feeling, when it like creeps up slowly as it starts to go back up again, that you have to get really comfortable. I always used to feel like I was in the spin cycle, of my washing machine. But I like the elation and fear combination that Mr. Shalhoub harkens to when he talks about success and fame and failure and all of it.
It seems to me, and just being introduced to your show recently, that you seem to be on the rise from a podcasting perspective, and I'm wondering if this is something new from you, or if this is unexpected based on what's been going on so far.
What it is kind of the way all great surprises are. It's pure joy. I started this podcast truly as like a lark, a labor of love, a desire to connect with people and help their stories be told. And the idea of doing a podcast was not something that I had ever thought of. A friend of mine suggested it to me. And I think sometimes when you just kind of put blinders on with complete naivete and just do your work, the response can be really lovely. And it's been almost a year it's not yesterday, but I think in podcast years, it's not a long time to be chipping away at something, but it's just been the most incredibly exciting ride, and that people love it as much as I love doing it is just an extraordinary gift.
Do you want to give a shout out to the person who gave you the idea for the podcast?
Yeah, his name is Mike Canzanero. He's a director, and he also runs a post-production facility in New York City called ProMedia. And he absorbed into his company, quite randomly, a podcast company. Hanger Studios is the name of this company. And he's like, hey, we just took on this podcast company, and I know you said you loved listening to podcasts. Do you want to do one? And I was like, Well, to be quite frank, the day before I had said to my husband, I'm going to say yes to anything that comes my way that doesn't put our family's health or finances in jeopardy. Like if it feels safe for all of us, even if it was sort of not on my mind to kind of try and see what happens. It was kind of an experiment. It was one of those kind of post-New Year's moments. And I don't make resolutions, but I do make, I don't know, big picture dreams for myself. Like, what are things that I haven't done? This was not on it. But so I was like, I'm going to say yes. And then literally within like 12 hours, my friend was like, do you want to do a podcast? And I was like, no, yes.
Did you know what you were getting yourself into?
I didn't, but I remembered when, I would read writers on writing. They always said to new writers, start with what you know. Like, that's a great place to start. And I thought, okay, I'm going to use that model for a podcast. I'm going to start with something I know. And I had been acting for 25 years. And the people I know are actors. I thought, well, who's going to sit across the table from me in that booth? And actually, the next day, I bumped into my friend John Slattery, who was on Mad Men, the show Mad Men. And he was like my first guinea pig. And he was willing, and he came in, and we had such a great time. And at the end of our conversation, he's like, you're kind of like a Howard Stern, like a female Howard Stern. And I thought, I don't know if that's like the nicest thing anyone said to me or like the most awful thing someone's ever said to me. But I looked at him, and his eyes said that he meant it as a compliment. And he's like, no, I just felt so comfortable. I literally forgot there were headphones and a microphone. So what greater praise for your first one could there be? And I felt like I was onto something. And, because Slattery came in, it gave me, I could call people and go like, hey, John Slattery was here. Yeah. So I owe him a debt of gratitude also, because being the first is, not everyone is willing to be the first. And he was.
Well, they always say that luck is when preparation meets opportunity. Mm-hmm. And so, I think this was a long time coming, because you've built up these relationships and these friendships and these connections, so that when the opportunity came to have the studio came available, and it's all, I think they call it kismet or
kismet and serendipity. And totally. And, as much as getting older can be a painful experience, there's something to be said. The longer you've been in a field and the longer you've been in your profession, these are really long-lasting relationships. I've known John for 20 years, right? So that's the great thing about not being a baby at this thing. Yeah. And we have really long-lasting friendships, my guests and I. Where
does the skill come from? This skill that you have of being just a fantastic conversationalist? Is that something that was learned, or is that something that you were inspired by other people and you saw that they did it well and you just picked up tips along the way?
I think a little bit of both. I think as an actor, which is what I've been doing for my adult life, so much of what I've done when I play a character is research it very deeply. And part of that not just comes from, Googling certain kinds of people, but it's talking to people. And, if I'm playing a doctor, I'm going to go talk to a bunch of doctors. And if I'm playing a painter, I'll go, to different artist studios. And as someone really interested in being as authentic as possible in whatever role I'm playing, and a truly curious human being, I think that's what drew me to being an actor to begin with. I think when I look back, I might have very much loved being a journalist. I think I might have loved being a therapist, but my sister had already taken on that role in my family. The therapist card had been, pulled out of the deck for her. So I think a combination of those things. And I also had, my parents are incredibly charming, warm people, and they always were really the household that was open to our friends and anyone who needed, like, if there was a holiday and someone didn't have a place to go, my parents were the first to like invite that person to have that holiday meal with us. And my mother was just amazing at drawing people out. And I've learned now that part of it was it made her uncomfortable to talk about herself. So if she was constantly asking questions of others, she didn't have to reveal anything personal. So it was a good trick on her part. But I think I learned a lot about the art of conversation and generosity in conversation and being a great listener from her. And then I think what I ended up doing professionally was a really great fit because, as I said earlier, I was always interviewing people to make my character as real as possible. So unbeknownst to me, when you talked about the idea of like preparation and serendipity coming together. Malcolm Gladwell talks about 10,000 hours, like 10,000 hours of practice and luck being sort of the center for a lot of very well-known people's success. I think I had 10,000 hours of being truly interested in other people's stories before I sat in the podcast booth orchestrating the conversation.
It seems like it comes naturally to you. And as you might imagine, I listen to a lot of podcasts and people send me show recommendations. But what struck me immediately was this familiarity. For some reason, I had a familiarity like with you and the guest. And maybe that's just a function of the relationship you have and the decisions you've made and who you were bringing on early and people that you had a relationship with and had a friendship with and had a history with. Because it just felt so like cozy. I don't know what else is the other word. And I caught myself laughing out loud at times too. It was really funny.
Oh, that makes me so happy. I think what feels really good to me now is not everyone on my show is still one of my closest friends and that my listeners can't tell who I have known for 20 years and who I've known for 10 minutes since we chat a little before we start our conversation. To me, that's been like the most remarkable feeling, that whether it's, someone who feels like a brother or someone I've known for a day, that the result of the interview feels the same. And that's the most satisfying thing I can say has happened so far.
I think what struck me the most was the fact that you had some of these bigger names on early that seem to let their hair down. And I think that speaks to their relationship with you, their trust in you. They know they're in the podcast booth with a friend, and it's not a reporter, and it's not someone who's out to get them, and it's not someone who's looking for, some insight into their private lives. You've had this time with them, and when you can tell, because like when you had the Kristen Chenoweth on and she's, telling her story about her challenges, growing up and with her height and then her little
being tiny. Yeah.
And I felt like she felt safe sharing that story with you.
Listen, I think so. I have an interview. I don't know when this interview is going to go live, but I just interviewed Octavia Spencer, who she won the Oscar for The Help and was just nominated for Hidden Figures. She's someone I've known for a really long time. She and I were in a short film together in 1999 or something. And, we started talking about the evolution of her career. And she got to this moment where she was talking about getting cast in The Help and all the people in her life who sort of helped make that happen. And she started to cry and she was like, God, I haven't thought about that moment. I said, do you remember? And I think sometimes it's like, what's the question you're going to ask that's new for them? I mean, she must have, throughout that press junket, talked about playing that part 1,000 times for, a day. And I just said, do you remember the moment where the director called action for the very first time? And those are the kinds of questions. It's not, no one is there to promote a project. Mm-hmm. No one is there to plug anything. There's no publicist sitting outside kind of telling me what I can or cannot ask them. And I think what's really, people have asked me if I want to create a visual component to my show, either live stream it or have it filmed and put it up. There's something about being in a podcast booth, and I'm sure you've experienced this. It's like being in this little confessional because there are no cameras and you have headphones on and you're in each other's heads, literally, right? Hearing each other. It's so intimate. And my podcast booth, I will just say, if you're ever in the city and you come visit, it is like the coziest, prettiest little room. And it really does promote this feeling of safety. And also, Harry, I'm not there to try to trick anyone or get anyone. I would never air anything. I have called friends afterwards and gone, I've loved that story. I don't think we should use it. You know, it's not them saying it. I'm like, I love you and you're integral. I just respect you so much. And I love how safe you felt, but there's no reason for us to share that, you know, with the world. So it really is, it's been a very special thing. And whatever happens, just to know that these interviews last forever, whether I do 8,000 more or 10 more, it just lives. And that's a thrilling thing also about podcasts.
What's interesting is that you sent me a link to ShowScore, did a story about you and the podcast. Is it interesting for you, for someone to want to talk to you about something that's not directly related to the acting? Now they want to talk about you in the show.
I'm so excited. It's just, I'm so thrilled. I mean, I think I'm very comfortable being interviewed because I, for so many years, was on the other side of this. You know, I was this, right? People were talking to me about the shows I did or the, TV shows I did. I want to share this podcast with as many people as possible, not because I'm hosting it, but I think these guests are so special and they really are, for my money, the best artists of our generation, truly the most talented actors of our generation. And I have really two criteria to come on my show. You have to be unbelievably talented and kind. There are a lot of really talented people out there, and a lot of them have even now asked to be on my show.
Wow.
And I know their reputations, and I just feel like, no, because for me, it's really about celebrating the possibility of both, that you can be tremendously successful and live with gratitude at the same time. And my guests do. That's like the questionnaire I send out before. Are you nice?
No. Okay, sorry.
Right. What charities are you passionate about? What are you using your celebrity for?
Ooh.
Where is your activism? Because aside from the swag bags and the, reservations at a restaurant and all of the, and being bumped to first class, which are great perks of celebrity, how are you giving back?
Yeah. So they don't leave with a swag bag when they're done with your...
I didn't say that. No, they do. A lot of my guests, Tate's Cookies has been very kind, and my green room has a lot. Who doesn't, will work for cookies, right?
Yes, that's true.
Like at the end of the day, and they're gluten-free. If you're the only thing they're not is calorie-free, but they're almost good for you.
I think I will take you up on that offer to jump into your studio if I am in New York City. And even if I'm just going to record a promo, like, this is Harry Duran, host of Podcast Junkies, and you're listening to Ilana Levine, Little Known Things.
Perfect. Little known facts.
Little known facts, sorry.
With cookies. Totally. You know what? If I ever need, if I want to do a new promo, your voice,
thank you.
I feel like I'd get more listeners just with that. So, honey.
What's been the most surprising thing for you? Because I'll be honest, I didn't know about you as an actress, and my first interaction with you is you as a podcast host, right? And then I'm like, but now so I'm coming into it with fresh ears and fresh eyes, and that's how I see you. So is it been interesting for you, for people and new people to discover you with you as this is the prominent role that you play now for them?
Yeah, I have to say, when I had kids, and so at the time that my first child was born, I'd really been doing theater's my love and my passion, and I had the great fortune of doing a lot of things on Broadway, which was extraordinary. But that schedule is like the worst thing in the world for having children. Like you're working the night shift. So they would get home from school or whatever they were doing, and like dinner time and bath time and bedtime, which is kind of a really sacred, beautiful thing. And it's fleeting. Like they grow up really fast and they're suddenly, you're not there for any of those things anymore. So I did want to try to transition into something that allowed me to have more control. I've directed a bit, I've produced a bit, but anything, the kind of I'm going to say yes model was also sort of And what can I do that makes me feel creative and fulfilled and also be around for these kids that I wanted desperately to have? They were not accidents. There were no more planned children on the planet than the children Dominic and I had together. So I would say that being appreciated for anything that one does is a really great feeling. And that's not to say that I'm not also still going to act and that I'm not actually reading scripts right now, actually, for what my next play might be. I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled to have found something at this point in my life that's completely unexpected, that is bringing a lot of people a lot of joy. It really makes me happy. I feel so lucky and so grateful.
Has it opened up any new doors for you?
I guess in some ways it has. I mean, this is happening so fast. Like, it's really happening fast. And I have been approached by people to make this into something else. And I don't know what that will be. And I don't know if that's even going to happen. I feel like the reason it is working so well is for all the reasons I said before. And I feel like the minute an actor is conscious of what they look like or worrying about what they look like, I feel like the whole tone of the thing, maybe not as much for men, I'm not sure, but I feel like women have to be very protective of their images, right? And Hollywood is not the most forgiving. And so the idea that all of the actresses, gorgeous to a person, can come into my booth and really like be in their pajamas if they wanted to. I think part of what's made these interviews so rich and personal and really feel like a slumber party is that they're in their pajamas, right? Or some metaphorical version of that. And I worry that the minute it becomes televised in any way or even on YouTube, that's going to shift a little bit. So I don't know what's going to happen, but there are things being presented, and we'll see if we can keep the show what it is in some larger thing. But having sponsors is kind of amazing. Being able to make a nickel doing this is an amazing thing. And I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah. So
I'm meeting you, like the podcast community. I cannot believe how incredibly warm and amazing, I feel like I've known you my whole life, right? Like, I just keep meeting these angels. I can't even tell you how thrilling that is. So unexpected. When you say what's unexpected, Harry Duran is who I'm chatting with right now. Like, okay, I'll take it.
Well, you got to make it out to the conferences. There's a big one coming out in August in Anaheim. It's Podcast Movement. It's going to be about 2,000 podcasters there. The community, I mean, that's from day one since I started my show. It's like we're all so supportive of each other. There's no like backbiting or just it's maybe friendly competition, but we just want everyone to succeed. Naturally, there's the NPRs and the Mark Marons who are just millions and millions of downloads. But there's also the new ones coming up, and every time I have a chance to highlight a podcaster that's doing something great, 9 times out of 10, they're people that I've met before, and I want the world to just hear what they're doing and hear what they're saying and hear how great their shows are.
Well, that's really, you're so generous. That's really nice of you.
Yeah, I mean, it's ongoing project, just to make sure I'm always trying to be a better person yesterday than I was today, and it's that similar cycle as well. Some days you don't feel like you've done well, or some days you feel like you've taken a step backwards. But I think if you always look for opportunities to do good for someone, or to give someone an opportunity, or to help someone who was there where you were 2 or 3 years ago, I think those little things eventually like add up. And as long as you do it without the intention of waiting for something back, then I think you'll be fine.
Yeah, that's. I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right.
One of the things you talked about in the Show Score interview was this idea that everyone's got a podcast, and you said they're like cute little dogs. So did that make you pause when you first started, or did you feel like
no?
It
didn't. I mean, it really is one of those examples. Like, I'm so glad I didn't look right or left, or for a researcher, had I really put all of the time and effort into researching podcasting or podcasts that I do in researching my guests on my podcast, I would never have done it. I would have been so overwhelmed and intimidated and confused about how to even make a dent in the podcasting landscape, because there really are, know it because I listen to so many. So I think it was really innocence is bliss, right? Is
Yeah.
that the expression? There was something to be said for that. I wasn't looking for this to be, this isn't a career choice or, we're going to pay our mortgage because I'm doing little known facts, right? It really was like, how do I preserve the stories of these people and help archive them who I respect so much? It was almost like a PSA. I'm going to do a public service. I'm going to these people are amazing. And I remember I was sitting with my friends going, I cannot believe these are my friends. This is ridiculous. These people are amazing. And I'm not as funny as they are when they're on Seth Meyers or Jimmy Kimmel or Fallon, and they are all brilliant at doing those things. There's so much nuance and complicated life to their story. And I think I also got exhausted by that whole idea of celebrities, they're just like us. Look, she's shopping in Whole Foods. Great. Is that why we're the same? No, we're the same because whether I'm starting up, a vacuum company or an internet company, or I want to open up a bookstore, most of going after what we want is rejection and not having anyone buying what we're selling. No matter what, whether you're an entrepreneur or an artist or a teacher, most of life is rejection, right? Actors just have to do it in a very public forum.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, what's been so interesting is how do all of my guests and how do all of us as human beings get up the next day when it's day after day of kind of feeling like Sisyphus, like pushing the rock uphill, and then it comes back down. And so much what I wanted to offer, and obviously through the lens of these sexy, attractive, talented people, I knew that would get people to listen to my show, was really to inspire people, no matter what it is their passion is, to remind them that even the people that TMZ and People Magazine kind of and reality television kind of give them to us on this platter of affluence and ease, that it's really hard for everybody, just in different ways. So that's all. I wanted to offer inspiration that no matter what it was you were trying to do, that the people you admire or think you know and admire are going through the very same things, and that's the connective tissue between all of us as humans. Whether you're Cynthia Nixon or me or you, we're all trying to help with fifth grade math that we don't understand.
Yeah, from what I hear, we don't have any kids. From what I hear, that new math is kind of crazy.
It's literally, I keep saying to my kids, listen, look at what mommy and daddy do. You really will never need to use this. Please tell your teacher you have an iPhone and a calculator, and nothing you're going to do in your life is going to need any trigonometry.
That's hilarious. Speaking about the sponsors, obviously we're podcast about podcasting, talking to podcasters. I was wondering if at some point Dominic and the kids got tired of eating the sweet and sour salmon with bok choy and ginger fried rice.
It's so funny. I made 10 different. I did. Part of having me be your host, if you're a sponsor, is allowing me to kind of put the copy into my own voice, and I won't use anyone whose product I haven't actually tried or used. So I did 20 of them because we've been making Blue Apron now for weeks. And that was the first recipe I ever did, but they keep running the same ad. I feel awful for my guests that they have to that's the same meal for months on end. I did one with this Parmesan crusted chicken.
Yeah, that one just came out. Yeah,
it did. We did these amazing tacos, this Middle Eastern food. It's really good.
Oh yeah,
really
we use it.
good.
Yeah, we use it. I love it.
It's delicious.
Yeah.
All right. Well, go use coupon code known facts and you will get, I can't remember, but 3 meals free or something.
Yeah.
And then you can cancel, do the free meals, then sign up again.
Yeah.
Do it again. Anyway, that's hilarious. I just said the same thing to Dominic. I'm kind of mortified at this point. They think
it was funny. I would listen to a couple, and then you just listen to the ad read, and then I started I was like, is that the same recipe? And then I was naturally curious as a podcaster. I go back and I started playing it, and I was like, oh, she's in it. I was like, I got to give her grief about this. I'm sorry,
Harry. And also, I'm sure your listeners understand what we're talking about. But Blue Apron is a sponsor, and I read an ad on my show, and it keeps being the ad with the same recipe over and over again.
Well,
but guess what? You can fast forward through that.
Yeah. But we would never do that, Blue Apron. We would never do that.
I love them. I love them. They were like, will you tweet about it? And I was like, actually, yes, I would, even if you weren't my sponsor, because it's been a game changer in our kitchen.
Yeah. And so it's so funny because a lot of the things that you say about things you've learned becoming an actress, they really apply to podcasting as well. And this just, even things like research or being engaged or understanding what it is you're getting into, or, there's different levels of prep that you can take. The other thing that strikes me is the fact that you can relate to your guests because you've been an actress for 25 years, like you said, and the stories, the ups and downs. And, I took acting for like 3 years in New York City. And so some of those things about auditioning and were really funny. And I'm sure actors can relate to it. People who've never been an actor can relate to it because they love to hear like anything that's behind the scenes. People love that sort of stuff.
Totally. Me too. I love it. I'm sitting there like, tell me more.
Yeah. And so I think it's just great, the parallels, and it's part of why I feel like the guests can connect, because I can't see their face, but I can almost hear the inflection in their voice. It's like, oh yeah, you get it, or you understand, or you can relate, or something like that.
Yeah. And what's so funny is, truly, I mean, I've, Matthew Broderick, Molly Ringwald, my guest list is really successful people who've been doing this since they're kids, right? Like for a very long time. And the minute I say to any of, or Laura Linney, like, can you think of an embarrassing audition story? Literally, they're like, I have hundreds.
Yeah.
I have hundreds. And that even can include something that happened, yesterday. Like it's a never ending cycle. Even if you're super famous, if you want to do a part that you've never done before, the director will probably want to see some sample of what you would be, if you're always playing an ingenue and now you want to play a serial killer, they don't have anything to see you in that you've done that. So I mean, I sit there both inspired and disheartened. Like, are you kidding me? Molly Ringwald is still auditioning. I'm done.
Yeah.
It's kind of, it's like a cautionary tale at this.
Well, it's the nature of the beast, right? I mean,
yeah.
You have to ride that wave for as long as you can, because it's going to come down, and it's either going to come crashing down, or you're going to be able to surf it down into, your 80s and 90s. And, there's some actresses that pull it off and they look amazing doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. But think about it, like in our economy right now. So it's true for actors, right? Like they're still having to go around looking for work. How many CEOs or people who have had really high level jobs, and then the company folds or they lose their job, which is happening right and left and all over the world. And suddenly they're back at a job interview, right? Like it used to be HR sending them names, and now they're going back to square one and dealing with like 20-year-olds who already have their job, who will work for almost, right? Like it really, there are parallels no matter what career you are aspiring to or have been a part of.
How old were you when you knew that you wanted to be an actress?
I came to it late. I wasn't one of those kids who did it in school growing up or community theater. We always went to the theater in my family. Theater and films we just loved it and did it together often as a family. But it was really in college that I fell into it. And I don't really know what gave me the confidence to, it's so ballsy, right? Like I'm going to as an adult person, like I'm going to be an actress. Like really? I remember Laura Linney, whose father had been a playwright, said it took her a very long time to say out loud, I'm going to be an actress. And it took her much longer than her peers and colleagues in college, because she'd spent her life watching actors in rehearsal in her father's play and really knew not the idea of it, but how hard it was and what it took to really be an artist, not an actress, but an artist, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I just fell into, I met a teacher when I was in college that was just an incredibly inspiring acting teacher. And I saw that these were my people, and I didn't know what was going to happen. And my expectation was that I'd do it in school and maybe do it as a hobby and find a way to make a living. And I got lucky very quickly and started making money at it very quickly. And that story wrote itself in a way. Yeah. It was quite unexpected.
What's interesting is if you were to look at this as a timeline and you see like the way things are put into motion, like you start and you become an actress and you make relationships with people, and then you think that those threads are just going to go out into the ether and they'll never be reconnected. But now through the podcast, some of these threads have been weaving their way through your life for the past 20 years.
Yeah. I mean, Cynthia Nixon was in my first job, right? Like, in the late 80s. Like, it's crazy. Yeah. I mean, I was a kid. I was in school and we were doing this thing together. So yeah, it's inspiring.
So I was thinking as you were talking about how you came about, how acting came about for you. And I was just curious as to whether there was anyone that's been a mentor for you or who you looked up to or someone who inspired you to allow you to take this path.
Yeah, I mean, my first acting teacher was a woman named Gloria Maddox, and I studied with her. And again, not knowing that this would be a lifelong career, but only, here's a woman who's incredibly generous, special, and smart. And I feel like what I learned was that acting was a craft, right? Like anything else, it was a craft, and it took hard work. And she really would take you through layer by layer by layer in creating a character. We had to write journals about, we would be playing a fictional character, some character in a play that was completely made up. It wasn't like I was playing, I don't know, Eleanor Roosevelt. It was like a made up person. And we would have to write, journals in the voice of that character. We would have to dress like that character. We would have to, spend a lot of time really layer by layer creating this character. So with that, a lot of people started dropping out, right? Like there's the idea of being an actor and then like, this is as hard as anything else. Like where's the fun? So I feel like she was a really beautiful person in my life. And she has since died she had MS and she passed away, ALS, way too young. But she's someone in my early career. And then the people I worked with in my very first job, for example, I mentioned Cynthia Nixon. I just met these young actors and older actors who, as successful as they were already, their work ethic, their generosity with everybody on a set, from actors to crew, whether it was someone, doing the catering for the movie to the director, right? Like I really learned early on from Cynthia Nixon and Robert Altman was the director on that project, that this is a family and there's no one family member that's more important than another. That to make this thing, it takes everyone.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
What is the one most misunderstood thing about you?
About me?
Yeah.
It's so funny. I was just saying to my husband, the thing that makes me the most nuts is when I feel misunderstood, right? Like it makes me nuts when someone thinks I said or meant or did something, anything other than it coming from a place of kindness. I have become friends with a lot of people since I've had kids who are not in the arts, right? Yeah. Who are not actors. And so very often, if I give one of them a compliment, and these are women who I love so much, we've been in the trenches raising kids together, right? And I'll say like, you look beautiful, and they will often say, well, how can I believe you? You're an actor. And so they're taking now, by the way, is there anything wrong with like trying to make someone feel good? No, like there are worse qualities to have, right? But every so often someone will be like, I don't know whether to believe you because you're an actor. Wow. And they're teasing me, right? Yeah. But there's like a little teeny bit of truth in there, and it kind of cuts me to the quick, because the thing I most admire in others and want from my children and everyone in my life and in the world is integrity. And so the minute my integrity is called into question in the stupidest of ways, like I like that lipstick color, really, like it right to something deeper and more important. Yeah. Like I love that painting that you made. It kills me. So I don't know if that's something that's like misunderstood about me, but that is a little known fact about me, that when someone thinks I'm being insincere, it is soul crushing for me.
I'm sure.
Because I pride myself on sincerity.
Yeah. What have you changed your mind about recently?
Wow. My hair color. I don't know. And I don't know that being this blonde was a good idea, but I definitely changed my mind about my hair color. Had we met yesterday, I would have had very brown hair.
That's
and
funny.
now I have incredibly blonde hair.
This is your new podcast due then.
Yes, I hate that I'm giving you such shallow answers, but I'm doing that like what's the first thing that comes to my mind, and that's it. And also, I think I got exhausted after the election. We were all calling our congressmen and we were marching and we were kind of spending a lot of time actively and being as active and vocal. And I got a little burnt out and thought that my activism wasn't going to matter. Mm-hmm. And what I've changed my mind about is that it does. It really does. And that I may not be able to feel or reap the benefits of it as quickly as me and my compadres had hoped, but that we mustn't get exhausted. This is a marathon.
Yeah.
And I need to pace myself, but I mustn't give up.
What's interesting is that I don't think you've done much politicizing on the show, but I think it's interesting to understand that you do have a platform and you can choose how you want to use it. I've been conscious of that myself with this show, but I think it's nice to know that there are other ways that you can influence people, and you don't have to necessarily be in their face and say, "Hey, look at how this person is terrible." Instead, what you're doing is you're showing, like, look how two people can be great, and look how we can talk about great things and great experiences.
Yeah, and work together. And I do, I have been both on the website and as I upload more episodes, what I am trying to do is have the people that come on my show who do have a platform and who are really recognizable talk about organizations that they're passionate about, and a lot of funding to organizations that, many of us are passionate about. Their funding is at risk. So there are ways in which I'm trying to use this platform, not necessarily as a bully pulpit to talk about who I like or don't like, who's in terms of politicians, but here's how we boots on the ground can help support, PBS or, whether it's public television or, women's rights, all sorts of things, or candidates who may run in the future, arts organizations. There's so many ways we can talk about things that we can do that are in our bandwidth, and helping me do that are these celebrities that come on. And if there's anything we learned this election, what celebrities think is irrelevant in terms of how people vote. I mean, right, the biggest Hollywood stars mostly came out for Hillary Clinton, people who generally, sell out their movies in seconds. And if they're on a red carpet, people will, shove each other out of the way to try to see them. It didn't change the vote. Yeah. So actually, what we've learned is people want a celebrity in the White House, but not necessarily want to hear what other celebrities think about where they should, put their votes. So it's been a really interesting time. And what's been nice, I think it's really important also to go, sometimes we just want to create entertainment for people because times are dark economically, emotionally, environmentally. Yeah. So if I can put a little levity, not just inspiration, but some joy. My podcast is pretty darn funny. These people are hilarious, and I'm kind of funny. Yeah, so I think there's a lot of joy in the content, and I'm not going to apologize for that. I think that's a fair thing to offer the world.
Well, I'm thoroughly enjoying the show. I'm really happy we've been able to connect. And it's just, we started the conversation on Twitter, which is hilarious.
I love it. I love it. You're my Twitter brother.
And it's been a pleasure to chat with you and have these Twitter conversations with you as well, because there's a funny thing that happens, and I'm sure you can relate, that in podcasting, that you start to get to know people by virtue of listening to them on their show. And so now, I know about Dominic, and I know about like the kids and things.
It's such a funny false intimacy, Harry, because I feel like I know you really well because I listen to you, but it's thrilling to like get to put a face to it also.
So I'm excited at the popularity of your show, and I'm wishing it all the best. And I think it's just going to get more popular as people find out that there's a way to have conversations with celebrities that doesn't have to feel false or stiff and familial. Maybe that's the word.
And my biggest hope is not that people, I feel like people so often listen and they go, oh, I wish I were her. Yeah. And what I want the takeaway to be is, I am her.
Yeah.
Right? That's the biggest goal is there's all of this like us and them and if only I, and I keep wanting to bring it to we're all the same. We're all in this together. I want your autograph. You want my autograph. I wanted to play my first Broadway play was with Alan Alda just before we say goodbye. And every night at the stage door, he's been so famous for so long since MASH was on TV, and it was my first Broadway show. So the idea of someone wants my autograph, this is amazing. And I remember when he did come out the stage door, he was really shy and he would often sneak out the back actually. But on the nights that he came out the door with the rest of the cast and people would ask for his autograph, he would say to a person, only if you will give me yours. And they were so startled by that. They were like, no, you're Alan Alda. And he's like, what's your name? And she'd be like, Sarah. He's like, you're Sarah. And it was such, when you ask about teachers, that taught me everything I needed to know. Because he had been at it, I would imagine, for 30 years by the time I met him. And he had the same humility and gratitude that he got to do what he loved to do and get paid for it, but never felt above or different or better than anyone. And that was an incredible lesson for, a 19-year-old actress at the time, right? For me to see that, amazing.
I actually have a connection to Alan Alda. We went to the same high school.
Oh, are you from Brooklyn?
Well, no, Stepanek. He went to Archbishop Stepanek in...
Wait, where is that?
White Plains.
Oh, I'm sorry. Right. Okay. No, I'm from Brooklyn. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, he's coming on my show next week. And now little known fact, I didn't know where he went to high school. And now I do.
You do.
You just made me look really good, Harry. Thank you.
You can remind him of that.
I will.
Well, Anna, thanks again for the time. What's the best place for folks to track you down online?
littleknownfactspodcast.com. All the episodes are there and you can find out about me and my guests there. And I mean, obviously it's on iTunes and TuneIn and NPR One. Those are, if you guys listen to podcasts there, it also lives there. And you can find me and Harry tweeting at each other on Twitter. It's at Ilana Levine, and Instagram, Little Known Facts Podcast.
Thanks again. Hope you have a fantastic day.
You too, Harry. Thank you so much. This was so much fun.
Thank you so much, Ilana, for originally reaching out on Twitter. It was so interesting because you can't predict where the feedback is going to be coming from or where people will hear about your show. And it's one of the reasons why I like to be so present on all platforms. And I know it's a little bit of work, but if you are passionate about your podcast and if you're passionate about growing your listenership, understand that it's something that needs to happen one listener at a time. And sometimes the listeners become guests, and sometimes the guests become listeners. And I think if you treat your guests like gold, which is something I've spoken about in the past, then you can't go wrong. You can establish that relationship that's just going to grow for years and years. And there's some that are still going strong 3 years into this show. So we are a part of Podcastica.com, a interesting collection of unique podcasts. Head on over to Podcastica.com for the complete list of shows, intro and outro music composed by Cedar and Soil. Check him out at cedarsoil.com. Don't forget to support our episode sponsor, Podbean. Head on over to podbean.com/podcastjunkies. And don't forget the offer I made at the beginning of this show that if you do sign up, please let me know. First 2 listeners to sign up get a free half hour of coaching with me. So just shoot me an email, harry@podcastjunkies.com, to let me know that you did that. The retention hashtag is Little Known Ilana in honor of her show. It's Little Known Ilana, ILANA, as the hashtag, and you can tag Ilana at Ilana Levine, ILANALEVINE, and myself, podcast_junkies, and let us know you made it this far. Always fun to watch those as they come streaming through on Twitter. Tune in next week and hear my conversation with Dan Franks. For those of you that don't know, Dan is the co-creator, founder of Podcast Movement. We talk about the podcasts that he's hosted in the past, his take on the podcasting universe, and some things we can expect to see and hear from him as they learn more and more about how to host a proper podcast conference. And it's now one of the biggest in the world, definitely in the country. I think we're expecting about 2,000 people in Anaheim this year. So if you don't have a link already, head on over to podcastmovement.com/podcastjunkies to sign up. I already have my ticket, and I'll be there with my bright yellow Podcast Junkies shirts, which I always hand out during the event. And lastly, a two-part call to action. If you've already downloaded the PDF, which I've been mentioning for the past couple of weeks, it's at podcastjunkies.com/8tools, the number 8, TOOLS. It's my collection of tools that I'm using to help me be more productive with my podcast production and which have helped in my launch. And it's recently been updated for 2017. It's something I created when we started the show way back in 2014. And now there's a shiny new clean version. If you already have that in your hands, then the only ask for this week is that you write a review for the show. There's been a couple that have come in recently. So either a review or a comment on SpeakPipe. Those are always fun. And if you heard last week's episode, you'll see that I posted the one that was submitted to me by Mr. Dave Jackson. So thanks again for all you do to support this show. Have a fantastic week.